Hi guys, I hope you enjoyed my last video on which I took a broken grid military laptop and turned it into a working Colonial Marine sentry gun computer from Aliens. I had a lot of fun with that and I'm hoping to use it as a display piece at a future convention. Now, for this video we're sticking with the Aliens theme and I'm going to be working on this rather special pulse rifle, and the reason this is special is because it's been cast from a screen-used stunt rifle from the actual film. Now I should explain there were two different sets of pulse rifles made for the film. The first set were what they called hero rifles, which were metal, had working parts and could even fire blanks, which were used for close-up shots and for live fire scenes. But for the background scenes and scenes where the actors were doing stunts, they made several of these stunt rifles, which were cast from one of the hero rifles but were made of hard rubber, which made them a lot more durable. Although obviously these recast versions are made from resin. Now the first thing you'll notice is the overhanging barrel here. Now the reason for that is because one of the hero rifles was assembled with the barrel installed too far forward, and that was the one they used to cast all the stunt rifle props from. So if you look at the film and you see a rifle with an overhanging barrel, the chances are it was a stunt rifle. Now these are currently being sold by Yorkshire Props through their Facebook page. I'll put a link up on the screen and in the description bar below for anyone who wants one. These are a little rough looking, which is probably how the originals would have been. Though obviously, this being a copy of a copy, there's undoubtedly a few defects here and there that would have been on the original. So I'm just going to do a little bit of tidying up with this, but I'm not going to get too carried away. And the first step is filling in all these air bubbles you see here. Now if you want to pay a bit extra, Yorkshire Props do offer a painting and finishing service, but I opted for the unfinished version, which just comes with a coat of primer on it, as I wanted to paint this up myself. So here I'm just scraping the primer out of some of the little air bubbles here, just to get it back down to the resin. And I'm just going to fill these with a blob of modelling putty here. Again, I'm not going to go overboard, I'm just going to make it just a little bit better than what it is, because I'm sure some of these marks were on the original version, but yeah, just make it a tiny little bit tidier. There's also a few little nub marks here, which I'm just going to take off. But again, I'm not going to go too overboard. Okay, well that's the worst parts filled in. Now before I go much further, there should be a gap just here. So I'm going to have to carefully drill that out. That'll do nicely, I think. Then lastly, before painting, I just gave the whole thing a quick rub down with some 400 grit paper. Well, that's all the preparation work I'm going to do for now. I have given this a quick scrub with some soapy water just to get all the dust off from the sanding, which I've then rinsed and allowed to dry. I'm now going to give this a fresh coat of primer just to give this thing a uniform base from which I can paint on. For this I just used ordinary grey car body primer, which I picked up from a local motor store. After spraying the first side, I left it for an hour or so to dry, before flipping it over to do the other. It was then left overnight to cure before moving on to the top coat. Well, that's the base coat done. I've given it a quick rub down with some 1200 grit wet and dry paper, just to provide a key for the top coat. Now I'm going to be doing the black areas first, so I've masked off the shrouded part, and I'm going to be spraying the main gun parts with this satin black spray paint, because I think a semi-gloss finish better matches the finish on the guns in the film.
For this I just used ordinary hobby spray, which you can pick up at most DIY shops. This stuff is fairly thin, so I built it up in several light coats. Again, after finishing one side, I left it to dry for just over an hour before turning it over to do the other. It was then left overnight to fully cure before I removed the masking tape and moved on to the next step.
Right, well I'm happy with how that's turned out, so now that the main gun body's been sprayed up, it's onto the shrouds. Now I'm going to be painting this brown best, which is a colour made by Humble Model Paints and was the actual colour that was used on the rifles in the film. There's a popular misconception that these were painted olive drab, however that's not correct, they were actually brown bests. Now unfortunately, Humble don't make that particular shade of brown anymore, but I'm lucky enough to have an old tin kicking about which I've had for a number of years, and I've been saving for a special occasion such as this, so I'm just going to mask off these areas here and fire up my paintbrush and get on with that.
I thinned the paint from my airbrush at a ratio of 2 parts paint to 1 part white spirit, which seemed to work quite well. Again I built the colour up in several light coats, doing one side at a time and giving it about an hour to dry before doing the other side. Now for anyone wanting to acquire some brown bests to paint their own projects up, although Humble no longer make it, there are alternatives available from other suppliers, such as Owlclad and Archive X, so it is still possible to obtain the correct shade if you want to paint your props the right colour. After painting, it was left to dry overnight before moving on to the detailing. The area around the magazine clips were masked off and given a quick coat of satin black. And then the ammo counter area was carefully touched in with some matte black model paint. Now not all the stunt rifles bothered to paint this area in, so you could leave it brown best if you wanted to, but I'm a stickler for details and thought this would be a more accurate representation of how it should look.
Okay, I'm really pleased with how this turned out. Now, I used virtually a whole tin of Humble paint on this, in case you're curious, as I had to go back and redo a couple of spots, unfortunately. But anyway, that's now all finished. I've decided against weathering this, as I think it looks rather nice as it is. So the last thing I'm going to do is just give it a quick coat of clear lacquer just to seal the paint.
This was just ordinary matte lacquer spray, which you can find in with the hobby paints at most DIY stores. Although it looks shiny when first applied, it does dull down as it dries. There was still a slight sheen on it after drying overnight, but again, this will dull down over time as it cures.
Okay, well that's it all finished. The lacquer coat actually seems to enhance the brown on here, which I think looks great, as the brown best did actually look a little bit chalky when I first sprayed it on with the airbrush, but the lacquer seems to have given it a more uniform appearance, so I'm really happy with how that's turned out. Now, one thing I will point out that this doesn't have, that the original did, is a couple of U-bolts to clip the sling onto at the front and back. Now, it wouldn't actually take much just to drill a couple of holes and glue a couple of U-bolts into place, but I don't think I'm going to bother doing that, as I'm happy enough with this how it is. Now, if you fancy one of these yourself, at the time of making this video, Yorkshire Props are still selling these through their Facebook page, so if you're interested, be sure to check them out if you want one. Also, if you have an interest in the Aliens films, then I'd like to recommend visiting the Aliens Legacy Forum, which is a great resource when it comes to advice on collecting, prop making and costuming, so be sure to give them a visit. Now, I hope you've enjoyed watching me work. I had a lot of fun painting this up, so please be sure to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos as and when I get around to making them. I'm now going to put this on display with some of my other alien props, so thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.